Every Silent Hill tells a story about loss, but the kind of loss changes each time. You don't enter Silent Hill looking for answers. You enter carrying weight and hoping something will let you put it down. The first game was about searching for what was lost. The second, confronting what was lost. And the third, avenging what was lost. But Silent Hill F?
Scour every last trace of your name from my memory and the world! I want you not!
It's about fearing you had anything to lose in the first place. After about 2 decades of silence, Konami has returned to the Silent Hill universe with something bold and unexpected. Silent Hill F. What does the F stand for? I don't know, actually. I beat the game and I still don't know. Maybe it stands for final or fear, or more appropriately, finally. But yes, finally, we get a new Silent Hill that isn't a frickin' pachinko machine or a cancelled demo. With the new setting, a new combat system, and a dramatic shift in tone, one big question lingers. Is this really Silent Hill? The core gameplay loop should feel familiar to longtime fans. Exploring unsettling environments, solving the occasional logic-breaking puzzle, and surviving the nightmares entities that stalk you. But this time around, there's a fundamental shift. No guns. Silent Hill F is entirely melee-focused. The combat has a lock-on system, dodging, and a focus meter that slows down time for precise attacks. It's slower and more deliberate than other action games, and surprisingly, it works. Attacks with timing matters, not in a Soulslike kind of way, we'll get to that can of worms in a minute, but enough to keep your fingers tense, not curled into a fist-punching drywall due to difficulty. The focus system adds a bit of spice. Charging it lets you react to visual cues for counterattacks, but it drains your sanity meter. Lose all your sanity, and your health becomes drained instead. It's a small risk-reward loop that gives combat just enough bite. So while the melee combat, the game's only combat system, has become greatly enhanced, there's a catch. The weapon durability is back. Every weapon will break eventually unless repaired, and repair kits are limited. Combine that with the fact that enemies no longer drop loot, and you have a system that encourages avoidance. Stealth isn't mandatory. In fact, the mechanic technically doesn't even exist in the game, but it's often smarter than just charging in. Enemies have a vision cone that you can't actually see, but sometimes it's best just to run. Previous Silent Hill games gave you infinite inventory, but this game does it different. This game instead has inventory management, and it's a mixed bag, mostly leaning toward ignoring. You have limited item slots, some stackable, some not, and there's no way to drop items into the world, only destroy them. This turns repair kits, essentially the game's ammo, into deadweight in the otherworld sections, where you handle unbreakable preset weapons but still retain your limited consumable inventory. The repair kits essentially become useless in the otherworld, but you don't want to get rid of them either, so you can make use of them when you finally come back. This issue doesn't really come apparent until you start to come across items that can be sold at shrines for a large amount of faith, the game's currency that you can spend to upgrade stats or to buy other enhancements, unlike other healing items which can be sold for a small amount of faith instead of being used. These items' only purpose is to sell and serves as a primary way of making money in the game. This forces the player to curb their usual instinct of picking up every single item in the game like previous Silent Hills. The player needs to figure out for themselves how much is enough in order to save room for other items that they may need without having to backtrack to a shrine all the time to sell, or wasting items by just dropping them. Having said that, it's unknown whether there's dynamic items spawning. Just like Silent Hill 2 Remake, there are many item containers that may or may not be empty inside. The assumption of either the game dynamically keeping tabs on your inventory to decide whether or not to give you items for balancing purposes, or it's just purely random. I don't really know. However, there are hand-placed spawn points too. The most crucial case that this concerns is the return durability system. It is very possible to lose all your weapons and become completely defenseless, although this only happened to me once, in a specialized area revolving a puzzle. I was stuck during this part of the game and was actually getting nervous because the longer I took to solve it, the more combat I was forced into. but luckily I was nearing the end of that section anyway. Another instance that enforces the dynamic spawning theory is one time I had completely worn out a weapon, ran back to grab another weapon, only to find another weapon on the floor in the same area that I retreated from. Also, annoyingly, key items don't appear in your inventory. You have to check Hinako's hand-drawn map notes to see if you pick something up. Something you may not even notice unless you're paying attention. It's immersive, yes, but clunky. It's essentially the same thing that James did in the Silent Hill 2 remake, but at least in that game, it showed him doing it when the time came. This game doesn't do that, and Hinako just does it automatically without any notification of her doing so. Okay, so it's that time now. I know what you're probably wondering. It's been a topic of hot debate amongst the Silent Hill community. Time to address the elephant in the room. Is Silent Hill F a Soulslike? Look, I get it. There's parrying, there's a stamina-esque focus meter, it's slower and more action-focused than past entries, but what people are actually reacting to isn't Soul's DNA. It's just third-person melee combat. That's it. That's been around for decades. If that's the new standard of what a Soulslike is, then by that logic, Devil May Cry is a Soulslike. Skyrim is a Soulslike. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a Soulslike. And you know that's nonsense. Soulslike have specific elements. You drop currency when you die. You return to collect it. You memorize enemy patterns. It has extremely punishing difficulty. You have sparse checkpoints. Silent Hill F? It has none of that. This is still a survival horror game. It just happens to use modern melee mechanics, and frankly, thank God that it does, because if you're going to take away guns, you better give the player something in exchange. If the devs had simply stripped away guns out of the classic Silent Hill and did nothing else, yeah, this game would have tanked. Besides, the game taking place in Japan adds weight to the lack of guns. Even today, Japan still holds incredibly strict gun laws. So if you can't even find most criminals carrying guns, then the chances of seeing a young Japanese student using one is close to none. So really, F's combat changes aren't about chasing trends. They're about adapting to what was lost. And in this case, yeah, it's the guns, so the melee has to do something to make up for it. Now, Silent Hill was always known for its atmosphere, and the atmosphere feels like Silent Hill, just filtered through a rural Japanese lens. The game dials back the traditional American resort town vibe and replaces it with a mountainous village, shrines, and misty forests. This means technically, you're not in Silent Hill, the town, but Silent Hill is still very much here, just in spirit. For better or worse, this is yet another Silent Hill that doesn't put you in pitch black locations that require the use of flashlight, like Silent Hill 4. That's really my only gripe with the game's atmosphere, but that's just really me. That's what I like in horror, because I'm a great believer that something can be scarier the less that you're able to see of it, letting your imagination do all the work, and it drives you mad. The visuals, however, are pretty divisive. There's a lot of fog, so much that it can be hard to appreciate the level design. Yes, I know this is literally Silent Hill, but someone seriously just went to town on the fog machine and just said, now we don't have to worry about the lighting. No, really, lighting feels overly damp, and even enabling HDR somehow makes everything look even more dull and muddy looking. I think they either got the setting on backwards or, I don't know, something is wrong. You might say that this matches the tone of Silent Hill more, but Silent Hill 2 Remake came out before this, and clearly doesn't have that issue. Character models are great, they're expressive and they have high fidelity, but the environments often blur into just a big gray soup. The audio, though, is a much stronger area. Combat sounds are weighty and satisfying, especially when you land that perfect counter. That satisfying crunch you hear when you land a perfect timed hit is pretty ASMR sounding. Yes, I'm weird. Music fades in and out between fights, and ambient tracks build tension without relying on cheap stingers. Yamaoka's fingerprints are still here, but now blended with traditional Japanese instrumentation. The most obvious character comparison in Silent Hill F is, well, duh, Heather Mason. Like Heather, Hinako is a schoolgirl thrust into a nightmare. but her story unfolds in a 1960s Japan, a setting defined by rigid gender roles and repressive social norms. Hideko lives in an emotionally volatile household. Her father is an alcoholic who violently berates both her and her mother, while her mother, silenced by fear, is unable to stand up for either of them. Outside the home, things aren't much better. Hinako is bullied by classmates for spending time with her only friend, Shu, simply because he's a boy. Her only true moments of peace come when she's with Shu or her older sister, Junko, whom she deeply admires. But peace is fleeting. Silent Hill F uses its historical setting not just as background, but as thematic fuel, diving deep into ideas of societal conformity, mental health, teen alienation, and the pressure to fit roles that you never asked for. It takes a familiar coming-of-age arc and twists it into a grotesque spiral of depression. What strikes me as the most interesting about Silent Hill F's story is the contrast it draws with the earlier entries in the series. The first game was searching for what was lost. The second was about coming to terms with what was lost, and the third was about avenging what was lost. F, however, doesn't revolve around lost in the same way. Instead, it approaches the fear of never having anything to lose in the first place. Where past protagonists were reacting to grief or trauma already endured, F explores a kind of passive horror, being consumed by something completely indifferent to you. It's less about what was taken, and more about what was never truly yours to begin with. Now, what's striking about Silent Hill F is how unusually social it feels, at least at first. Where most Silent Hill games drop you into isolation right from the get-go with no one to talk to, and for a good majority of the game, this game starts out like a regular coming-of-age drama surrounding Hideko by her peers. Now, while this next part might be considered a spoiler, not knowing what I'm about to tell you might convince you that Silent Hill F is a one-and-done game. I'm here to tell you that it's not. Now, I won't get into the details, but the ending only leaves you with more questions. With the exception of the silly UFO ending that Silent Hill always has, and yes, there's one here too. You're meant to play through the game multiple times, supposedly at least twice, to get a full and true ending. Maybe, I'm not sure because I'm only halfway through my second playthrough myself. Luckily, Silent Hill F offers a New Game Plus mode, which carries over your stats and any fate accrued, so it's not like you've lost any long-lasting progress. And trust me, you're going to want to do this, because as early as the first scene on a second playthrough, you'll notice some subtle, but very key differences that might actually explain quite a lot. So is Silent Hill F scary? Not exactly, but it's not for lack of trying. But, that's really just me. If you've been through enough in real life, horror hits different. That said, F still has moments of genuine discomfort. One sequence in particular is one of the most disturbing things I've seen in the series. Not because of gore, but because of implication. A scene that still lingers in my head way after I've already seen it. Those less reliant on darkness or flashlight-based fear, which is a bummer for classic fans. Only a single section in the game really has a flashlight, and even then, it's not even really all that useful. You can still see without it. Most of the horror comes from the surreal and the quiet, which is where Silent Hill has always been the strongest. The rural Japanese setting is a bold change. Gone are the diners, the motels, and malls and alleyways of American suburbia. In their place, now we have aged shrines, misty mountain paths, and tight village corridors. The other world returns, but not in its usual form. In previous games, the world would slowly degrade into its nightmarish counterpart, rusted metal, blood, and decay. In F, transitions happen very differently. You're pulled into an entirely new space, none of which exactly spells scary or even disturbing in my book. Religious shrines, temples, and the like, all straight out of feudal Japan. It robs a bit of the psychological effect. It's effective in isolation, but it lacks that, oh god, I've been here before, but now it's wrong feeling. It makes sense, given the plot, but I still can't help but think that an integral part of the Silent Hill experience has been dumbed down a little. Still, with Silent Hill F being a shorter game than the rest, maybe it's a bit of a good thing that you're not visiting areas twice. That said, the lore is rich, especially if you read all the documents and notes. Unfortunately, You kinda have to, and at your own volition. Notes and other documents you find explain a large part of the story, especially the reason for the behavior of a lot of different characters, but the game won't automatically show you the document. Probably useful for speedrunners, I guess. Instead, you have to manually view Hinako's journal through updates whenever something new is found. Yes, the game is fully voiced, but without reading these documents, you're going to miss out on a lot too. There's a bigger picture hiding behind all that fog. And speaking of speedrunners, not that I really recommend speedrunning this game on the first playthrough, but speaking of playthroughs, the first run took me just over 25 hours. That's shorter than Silent Hill 2 Remake, which I clocked in about 40. That sounds like a huge downgrade, especially at $70, but the game wants you to replay it. Hence, the new Game Plus mode that I mentioned earlier. On the first playthrough, the ending leaves many questions unanswered, and it becomes clear that this is a story meant to be understood in layers, not all at once. Silent Hill F as a whole doesn't try to reinvent the franchise. Instead, it tries to reignite it. The game is very much in the same spirit as its predecessors, but the most obvious change is the gameplay. Whether or not it's better, it's a very tough call after having so many games with a hybrid of both ranged and melee weapons. This game instead offers only the latter, but a stronger focus on it than before. To some, this might seem more like it's more action-based than before, and yeah, I would have to agree that it is. But on the other hand, I would say that it has to be. Games are getting annoyingly more expensive, so replay value becomes much more important as a result, and a game's story can only be told in so many ways until the ideas run dry. So after all that, all you have left is just the gameplay. I feel that F is honestly playing it safe, but safe in a good way, not bad. We've been without a new real Silent Hill game for 2 decades that wasn't also, just a remake. So to make a huge leap into something different in a beloved franchise that has been laid dormant for so long would be a huge risk, especially without Hideo Kojima behind the wheel. But at the same time, not doing anything new to the franchise could also be just as damaging. And as far as the combat goes for the franchise as a whole, honestly speaking, it's always been just right for me. There's nothing exuberant about it, but the beauty with Silent Hill is that it doesn't need to be. The lore of Silent Hill, to me, was never about its combat, but its atmosphere. You're not meant to be a towering hero or even a professional agent a la Stars from Resident Evil. You're an average person with normal, average problems and trauma. So the way I see it, this is a game saying, hey, we're sorry we took so long to give you guys something new, so let's take a step forward, but not a huge one. Tell us what you think, and we'll go from there. Silent Hill F isn't perfect. It's foggy, sometimes too quiet, and makes some few mechanical missteps. It ditches tradition to explore something darker, sadder, and more introspective. It's not a Soulslike, it's not a reboot, it's not even the scariest Silent Hill, but it is a real Silent Hill game. And the first in decades to make me feel like the town still has stories left to tell. Do I have mixed feelings? Yeah. I most definitely do. But mostly, I'm just glad that it's back, and I hope it stays.